Oh, my bad. I think I downloaded the wrong thing at first for some reason. So yeah, just make sure to refresh this page, download demo 7 starter, and then go to your downloads, and it should be like right here at the bottom. Yeah, I opened the wrong thing. That was on me. So yeah, not this one. Oops. Okay. So don't worry about the name. My name just said the folder name just says that because I downloaded 2 copies. But just open this blue Xcode project file, and then you could try running the app and you could see what it should look like. So I'm just gonna run it real quick. Oh, that might be because you downloaded the demo from last year. So this as long as you just refresh and unwrap your demo 7 starter.zip file, it should say like that exactly, like with lowercase and everything. Is anybody else having the Alamo Fire issue? Or are we all up to here? So if you run the app, you should see that it looks something like this. It's a very simple, very simple app. It has it's a table view that contains a message and a poster. So the poster is actually really small. Now that I look at it. Let me like um okay. But if you can't read it, so the first poster was me, Elvis, and then the second one is Alden. And these posters are made down here in the shown messages data, where I have like my first message, I have a messages array, and my first message is a fake message sent by me. And then the other post is this other post by Alden that says another one. And so these are our 2 messages that we're presenting in our table view right now. But eventually we want to replace this array, this like declared array of objects, and actually pull like our messages from the web from our backend. And so just to explore the app a bit more, here we have, like I said, a table view. We have this add a message button here at the top right in the UI tab bar. And this add a message button is going to eventually like allow us to write stuff here in our body and then write the name for the poster. So it would probably be Elvis since it's me again. And then I click save and it would hopefully appear here. So we're gonna get to both of these points eventually during today's demo. And besides these buttons that we have on the screen, we also have 2 arrays, a messages data array and a shown messages data array. So for today's uses and purposes, we're just going to be using shown messages data. This is going to be the array controlling what messages are actually shown to the user whenever they're using our app. And a message object is actually defined as such. So we have like an ID, a message, a sender, and all of this conforms to Codable. And we also have this other thing called message response. So message response is going to be responsible for us receiving our whole list of messages because we have different methods of getting different things. So for example, when we want to load all of the messages for our table view at once, we're going to be using message response to get that list of messages. To kind of show why we're doing that, let me go back here. So you don't have to have Postman open, but I have it open here. Oh, it might be a little too big. But basically, eventually, we're gonna be using this endpoint here. It's basically just a link. And this link is going to allow us to pull all of our messages from our list of messages. So right now, as you can see, it's an empty list of messages, but let me post a message right now. So again, I have this other method of posting things, which is under like post. It's a post request, which means I'm going to be posting information to my message report. And here I could include a body, which is like a message from Elvis, and then the sender, which is me. And once I put in those 2 parameters, the message and the sender, and I click send, it'll send that message to my message board here. So now if I click get all messages again, if I ask like it to give me all the messages, it'll give me all the messages. So I already, as you can see here, I just clicked it after I created a new message, and I just got the list of all the messages that I have, which in this case is just one message. If I create another message, let's say instead of message from Elvis, it's a message from Alden. And I send this one, oops. Then when I get all of my messages again, I now have this whole list of messages. Let me make it look pretty. So I now have these two message objects, which just like my message class has like an ID, a message, and a sender. And the next one also has an ID, a message, and a sender. And both of these things are contained within a list, within an array of objects, of message objects, with its key being the messages tag. So this message is here corresponds to this message is here, my message response. And then this array of messages here corresponds to these two message objects that we have in our that we have associated with this whole like hierarchy of messages. This whole message response basically contains that list of messages that are going to be shown here on the screen, like right there. So that's what we're eventually going to be. Well, that's the first thing that we're going to have to tackle, like getting those two messages that we just got here. And the way we're going to do that is through the network manager. So last Monday, Alden talked about how we could create like specifically, I guess, GET requests, but also how we just in general create any kind of requests. And so today we're going to be talking about specifically how to get all of the messages for our posts, for our message board, and how to create our own message. So eventually you guys are also going to be able to create your own message and see all of your other classmates' messages. And yeah, we're gonna be really creative with this. Is probably gonna be our most creative lecture. So yeah, I get excited for that. And yeah, I guess I was straying a bit on the whole layout of our app, but basically we have this message table view, delegate and data source ourselves. We register this message table view cell here, and message table view cell has a message label and a poster label. There are only two things within each cell. We create this stack view to stack our message label on top of our poster label. So don't worry about that too much, but it basically just helps us constrain things easier. And here, as you can see, we only constrain our stack view because whatever we put into the stack view already has a specific constraint. So to our stack view, we add our message label and our poster label. And then all we got to do is constrain the stack view, and everything else is all automatically constrained. We don't got to worry about constraining the label or the sender name. We also have this configure function here that for every message, it sets up the message label.text and poster label.text. So this is where we get our text. This is where the text gets set up for our table view cell and the required init, which is always necessary when we have an initializer here. And the initializer just has these two functions down here, setup views and setup constraints, which both respectively set up all of our elements within our cell. So nothing too crazy in that file. So coming back to the table view cell, or to the table view, we register it with this message table view cell. We add it to our subview. And we also have this cool thing called the refresh control object. And so a refresh control object allows us to use this refresh animation up here. And we're going to use it to basically, well, refresh our screen. So eventually we're going to be creating posts. And we want to be able to swipe down. That way we could get the most recent posts from all of like the backend servers and stuff. So that's why we have this refresh control here. And these next couple lines basically say like if you have iOS 10.0 or above, then you could have the refresh control. This is just so that our code isn't buggy in case you're using a simulator that runs something younger. That way, like you don't run into any errors like following this demo. And we also have this add a message button here at the top right, which is basically just a button that we're using to push us to this new screen to actually create a post. So we're going to be messing with that later. And the only thing we have here is our message table view, so that's the only thing we constrain. And here's the dummy data that we actually create. So shown messages data, as you can see, is just two messages right now. If I were to make it empty, then you'll see nothing shows up. So as you can see, nothing shows up. And we have these couple little table view functions down here that we're going to be using eventually to play with our and interact with our table view. So for example, actually, we're probably not going to be getting to this part today, so you don't have to worry about that code too much. But this code down here is basically just setting up the table view. So, we have our shown messages data that is going to define however many rows we have. We dequeue a cell, we access the cell's data from shown messages data, and we configure the cell for that specific instance of data. And yeah, we're not going to be touching any of these functions here at all today. This is all just set up for our table view. What we're going to be touching today is the actual data. We're going to be playing a lot with the model representing the data that's in our table view today. That's all this demo is going to be about. And the next thing we're going to have to take care of is this function create message down here. This is going to be when we want to create a message. So we're going to get to this at the end of today's demo. And yeah, that's a, oh, oops, what happened? That's an what? Sorry, I didn't realize I created a array. That's an overview of today's lecture or today's demo. We're going to be tackling these two things to create a post and get all posts. And this is just how the table view set up. So are there any questions about the layout or anything like that before we jump into the actual networking code? Okay, cool. So you guys might have noticed that we have, oh yeah, the create message view controller is just a view controller with a message text view, a poster text view, and some actions saved to the button. We'll go more into depth on this when we actually create our posts. But for now, if you guys could all just come to the network manager file, this is where we're going to be handling all of our networking. So by networking, we mean like all of the requests that we're going to be sending out, how we're going to manage the data that we're getting, that we're retrieving. And I think that's it. Basically, we're just going to be managing all the data here. And eventually, we're going to be using this completion here in our view controller to actually update our table view to like receive that data that contains the text for the message body and the text for the sender. So right now, like I said, our first goal is to actually just get all the messages. So just to make sure that we're actually following, just to make sure that our thing actually works, I'm going to delete this shown messages data here because we do not want to actually use that data anymore. We're gonna be accessing data from the cloud. So yeah, the first thing we want to do when we actually get all of our messages is give me 1 second. So we want to like be able to tell what kind of requests we're making. So obviously, like get all messages, as the name kind of tells you, is going to be a get request. So this get request is going to be defined as such. So first, we're going to create a request variable here. Our request is equal to URL request URL. So we get the request, and then we say request.http method is equal to or get. So we're saying here we have this request, and we know that this request is going to be a get because we're trying to get all the messages. And then we're just going to say let task is equal to URL session. Share task. And the request that we're going to be passing in is the request that we made here. And when you see, normally when you see any kind of gray text, you could always feel free to press enter and it'll automatically break things down for you. So for example, data, we're actually going to name these things. We're going to call this data. The URL response is just going to be response, and the error is just going to be error. And now we have this, all of the space to actually handle how we're going to be retrieving our data. So from here is where I'm basically asking the database, hey, I'm trying to make a request. I'm passing you the request, and I'm expecting either all of these things or just one of these things to be given back to me. So if we get data, if we get a data back, then that means that my request went through. The link that I gave my app worked. So there's some data there that I now have, or what we want to do if we have some data, then we want to make sure that we actually extract all the information that we need from it. So the data itself isn't what we want, but we actually need to reformat it to be some kind of data we could actually use and put them within ourselves. So if there exists some data, so it's going to be like if let data is equal to data. If that data is there and is something that I could use and parse, then I will do this decoding. What is this on decoder? And then okay, so now at this point, we have this decoder, which is called the JSON decoder, that is going to decode our JSON, and we have our response. But we have to figure out which type of thing we want to decode our JSON into. So going back to our message Swift file earlier, we have a message codable object and we have a message response object. So we know that if we want to get all of the posts, if we want to pass, if we want to try to get all of the list of messages, then we're not going to be using just one single message here. Instead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting this message. We're going to be using this message response object to actually retrieve and to be used to decode our JSON into this kind of object. So whenever we're decoding anything in JSON, we have to be very what's the word? We have to be very specific about what we're trying to do. Because for example, when I get all messages here, you see that there's a specific name for the list of messages that I'm getting, and it's called messages. It's not like messages with a capital M, it's not messages with one S, but it's messages with like that specific orientation of characters. And so we have to make sure that this variable here, messages, corresponds perfectly to this messages here, or else our network call just won't go through. So we don't have to worry about that right now because I typed this out and already checked that it works. So we know that the spelling is fine. But we just have to keep in mind, when we're trying to actually get and decode our objects, we have to make sure everything matches perfectly. So we know here, this messages maps to a list of messages here, which have an ID, message, and sender, all lowercase, same as like the JSON does, which has an ID, messenger, and sender, all lowercase. So I'm gonna copy, or you need to copy, but I'm gonna go to network manager. So the type that I'm actually decoding my data into is going to be message response.self, because I'm saying decode my message to be of type message response.self. And if that doesn't work, catch. If I somehow can't decode my response the way I want it to be, the way I want it to be, or maybe like when I try decoding it, like maybe a character's off, then it's gonna go into this catch. Then catch, oops, let error. Then I want to print out, right? Local description. So if my networking call, so this is a particular case of when a networking call might go wrong. You might be able to get into this block here. So you might be able to get past like actually getting the data. So if you're able to make it in this part of the code within these brackets, then you know that your link actually works. But if you get into this error here down here, then that means that your link works, but there's something wrong with the way you're trying to decode. Most of the time, it's because like some of your parameters don't match up. Other times, it could be for something more serious. Um, but always make sure that your messages parameters over here match what the JSON says. So that should be the first thing you look at if you ever get some kind of networking issue. But now that we have this response here, we don't want to just like hold on to it. We want to pass it to our we want to pass it into our completion. So I have this completion, which is going to take in, as we can see here, this completion has a signature of a list of messages. And if I try passing a response, it's going to yell at me because completion doesn't take message response, even though message response has a list of messages here. It doesn't, like, it has a variable that contains a list of messages, but it itself is not a list of messages. So what we're actually going to be accessing within our response is response.messages. And now response.messages is going to be that list of messages that my completion is asking me for, because that's exactly what we want. We want that list, that whole entire list of message objects. And so I pass that into my completion. And it might be a little fuzzy what a completion is. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into exactly where we're going to be using this completion. But first, does everybody have this code? We're good here? Okay. I'm going to go into my view controller here. So we're going to be using this network manager function, which is called get all messages, in our create dummy data function, because this function is what gets called to set up our data. So how do we actually call this function? So all we're going to do is do network manager dot get all messages. And oh wait, did I do this one? Second. Oh yeah. Dot shared. So you got to do network manager dot shared, because the network manager is shared amongst all of our different kind of requests. And now once you do shared, which is like this variable here. Oh, whoops, not sorry. This variable here, which is shared, which is a instance of our network manager. So we're accessing this variable here. We do network manager dot shared and then dot get all messages. And now this completion, after you autocomplete it, presents you this gray text again. So whenever you see gray text, usually like this, always press enter. That should be the first thing you do. And after you press enter, you'll see that it gives you this other text. And this time you just gotta replace it with a variable. Oh, wait, not messages. Messages. So I'm replacing that part of the text with messages because I'm saying that parameter or what I should be receiving is going to be placed into this messages tag, into this messages variable. So to tie it all together, here in my network manager, we called completion and then response.messages. So this response.messages is going to be equivalent to what this messages is. They're both the exact same thing. It's just that I didn't declare one name to reference both of them. Instead, what I'm doing, which is what's nice about completions, is I'm just saying like, oh my gosh. Okay. I'm just saying for my completion, for whatever function ends up calling, or for whatever thing ends up calling this function get all messages, I don't know exactly what the completion does, but I know that its parameter is going to be a response. It's going to be response.messages. So response.messages is the same thing as this messages here. So now we have this messages variable that should have the list of messages that we pulled from the internet. So now what we're going to do is use it to actually set up our data, set up our array of shown messages. So I'm going to do dispatch queue.main.async. Don't worry too much about what that line does. Basically, this is all the code that I added. This is going to ensure that our networking requests happens sequentially. So no one networking request or nothing is going to happen on our phone until this networking request goes through. And I'll show you why this matters in a bit. But for now, you just make sure you have this code. And then the rest of the code is more, it makes more sense, in my opinion. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say self.messages data, actually self.shown message data. is going to be equal to this array of messages. And then once we actually put in like these messages into my shown messages data array, we want to reload our table view. Right after we get our messages, we have to reload this table view. Oh, not reload, please. Whoops, self dot messages table view reload. Why is this yelling at me?
Network manager and not a object.
Sorry?
The view controller, we don't make assign that to the show static.
No, it's not static. Static what? Static like the task. Okay. Hold on, let me test this out. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I think my error was here. I should have made this a static variable instead.
I guess just to answer your question in the back and clarify what this is. Static means that it's accessible anywhere in the code without an instance. And so we make a single instance for like the entire code and have it be used like that.
So whenever we're making a networking request, we're always going to be using this shared network manager. And once you do that, oh, this is not. This should show you the new messages that we have, but I don't know why it's. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was the last thing. So if you remember from Alden's last lecture, after you make any requests, you always want to make sure that no matter what, whether it's successful or not, you always do task.resume to tell other networking requests that A, I'm like done, and B, like present all the information that I have here from this networking request to my table view. So now after I run that, or after I fix that, you should now see all these messages that we have on our message board. Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so all I added here was a task.resume network manager in case anybody has any other questions on that. Here I added network manager.share.get all messages. And oh, you're talking about the static thing, right? So I added this static parameter here in the front of my shared variable. That way I could say I have one instance of my shared network manager, and I could use it wherever in my view controller, in my cell if I wanted to. But the static allows me to use it wherever in the code that I need it to be used, and it only exists once. There's only one existence of this network manager. Did that fix your issue? Okay. Is anybody else? Are we good up to here? So you should be seeing all the messages now. Cool. Yeah, congrats. That was your first networking ever. I feel like networking is a very magical process. It's like it took me like 2 hours to actually debug like this networking code here earlier. So it's always like very rewarding when you actually see it working. Yeah. So that's a good question. Add escaping basically says this function here is going to exist even if my outer function like terminates. So it could be the thing is we have no idea what this completion function is. That's what's nice about closures. Like this function could take our data and multiply it by like 1,000 and then put that into the table view. Or it could just put the messages into the table view. We don't exactly know what this function does. And so because of that, we don't know exactly how long it's going to take to execute this function, this completion function. And because we don't know that, we always want to include this add escaping parameter within our networking requests. That way, like we could say this get all messages function isn't held back to terminate by this completion. because usually what you would imagine is like if this completion function is a part of like my get all messages function, then my get all messages function would by default wait until my completion function terminates on this line here. It would wait it until this line terminates here, and only then would it resume all the other tasks. Only then would it load the rest of my app. And if that were the case, then that could cause a lot of errors with respect to like the lag that might be occurring on our app. So if I didn't have the ad escaping, then my code could be stuck on this line right here, and it wouldn't run until my completion is done. And so say I'm loading like 30 images, maybe 30,000 images in a table view. Then until I load every single one of those images, the rest of my app is not going to run until I actually load all of those 30,000 images first. And so we don't really want that. What instead we want is for our app to run, and for the loading this completion, which is going to call up the information, we want that to happen in the background while the rest of our app runs. Everything else, all this like retrieving data, whatever this completion function does, is going to happen in the background. That way it doesn't conflict with our user's experience and doesn't actually like make the app lag like it would. That was kind of long-winded. Did that make sense? Okay. But yeah, it's a very, very good question. Very important concept to understand. But yeah, this is how we actually get all the posts. So okay, I'm assuming we're good up to this point. So I'm just gonna move on to actually creating a message. So creating a message now isn't going to be the same as like our get all messages, because for one, it's not the same kind of requests. This one's a post request. And two, we're going to actually be passing in information within our create messages function, or within our create messages request. So how do we actually pass in these kinds of this type of information? So it's going to be very, very similar to our get all messages. We're going to have this again request variable. Oops. Our request is equal to URL request URL. It's the same. Okay, conveniently, this request is also the same URL. Typically, that's not the case, but for this create message request, it will be the same URL. And we're gonna say request.http method is equal to post. Okay, we're gonna do this other niche thing here, which is going to be request dot set value application / JSON for header content type. Okay. So this isn't too abstract. Basically, what that line says is the information that we're going to be passing on to our database to post our message is going to be of type JSON. And this is by default what the type of JSON looks like, application / JSON. And the HTTP header field is just content type. Just some standard practices whenever we're actually posting information. And then, so now we have to actually make the body for our posts. So we're going to create this body here, which is going to be of type string to any. And this is just this is just another kind of dictionary that we're going to be making. And just so you guys have like an idea of what is going to be put into this dictionary, here within our post requests, we have this this is basically the same thing as a dictionary. We have our keys and we have our values, which are both strings. So that's what we're going to be adding here. We're going to say message, which is our key, and it has to be spelled out like exactly like that. And it's going to have this body parameter, which is passed in through our create message function. So we're gonna have this variable, and we're also gonna put in a sender. That way we could see who actually sent this message. And the last thing, well, this is not the last thing, but we're passing this body. We're basically saying, okay, Now that you have this body, put it into my URL based on station. So this line is just saying, pass in my body into my request. And the rest is pretty standard to what we've already seen already. So we're just going to say let task is equal to URL session shared data task with request. Oh wait, this should automatically default data request. Okay, yeah. Request data response and error. And here, we're just going to say if let data is equal to data. If the data I got, if I have some data after I put in my request, then I guess for this case, we don't really want to do anything when we post a create message. I guess what would be nice is if we could see the message that was posted. So what we could do here is we could say do let decoder, same thing as above, JSON decoder, and then let response is equal to try decoder dot decode. Oh yeah, in this case, because this is one message, we're not gonna be saying it's a type message response dot self anymore. It's gonna be now message dot self because it's only one message from data. And we're gonna pass it into completion. And then catch the error. So all the code up to here is the same, like basically the same exact kind of code as we had in our get all messages requests, except now instead of message response dot self, it's message dot self because we're talking about one message here. And yeah, that should be it. So before we get to the fun part, we have to actually set up this refresh control stuff that I have here in my view controller. So go to your view controller and then go to refresh data. In refresh data is where we actually want to, refresh the data that we have. So I'm gonna just quickly, it's basically the same code as here. Except now I have an additional line, which is just gonna be self dot refresh control dot end refreshing, which is gonna end, well, it's gonna end the refreshing animation that we see there. So refresh data, I basically just copied the same networking manager here, get all messages, because I want, like when I refresh, I just want it to get all the messages again, So I'm just doing all that all over again, except at the end now I'm just going to be saying self.refresh control and end refreshing. So nothing too crazy there. Yeah. Yeah. If you run it up to this point, you shouldn't really get anything. The refresh should work down though. So like if I refresh it, if I pull drag and drop, you should see that refresh animation going away. But nothing's updating yet because we don't have any new messages yet. So yeah. Does anybody need me to go back anywhere else? It's gonna be like one more line of code and we're done. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Let me delete all of this. So basically this is the refresh data function that we have that's tied to our refresh refresh control object. And it's the same code. as we added here in our create dummy data. So it's just that copied. And then at the end, we add the self dot refresh control dot end refreshing. And if you run it, you shouldn't get any errors. But you also shouldn't see anything new. Well, I guess you should see like that refresh animation stop eventually. If you don't, that's an issue. You should probably get that fixed. Okay, I'm assuming we're good up to here. Oh yeah, it didn't stop. Did you do were you able to get all the messages at first? Do you have this like, let me like it's just like this one. Yeah, it's kind of tricky because it's only like one line that you have to add, but you don't even really need to add it for the actual functionality of the refresh to work. It's just so that the animation could stop like bugging you. Okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and try adding the last couple lines of code that we have. So basically, we have this function create message now that we want to use. So where do we want to use this function? Actually, we want to use it like right down here. So we have this create message function that's tied to our create message delegate. Oh, sorry, do you have some? Oh, okay. My bad. So we have this like create message delegate, and here is where we're actually gonna put in the functionality of creating a message. So how we're gonna do this? We're gonna say networking manager dot shared dot create message, and the body is going to be the message with the sender being the sender. And the completion could be whatever. I'm not gonna actually do anything with it because I don't need it. I'm just gonna print success because that means that it worked. And after you add this networking that share that create message function, you should be able to go here, insert some body. Hey guys, be like all this. Success. And once you click save, you shouldn't be able to see anything, but once you refresh it, you should. Okay. That sucks because that means that something happened with our requests. Okay, it's not working for me. Is it working for anybody? Okay. So then there's probably something wrong with our network manager. Okay, I'm gonna quickly go to my network manager and just see what's going on. Oh, okay, yeah, task resume. Thank you. Yeah. Always remember to add this line here, task.resume. After you create the task, always add task.resume. If that's not a Kahoot question, I'll be really sad. Sucks. Okay. Does anybody need me to go anywhere? After you add this one line, it should work for you, and then you should be able to create and like refresh. Does it work for anybody? Let me see. Again. Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's because people are adding messages, right? I think. Yeah. So as I'm refreshing, I can see more and more people creating some cool messages. Also, please be aware of the messages because I'm gonna be uploading this video and it's gonna be there for like years and years to come. So, but you should be able to see a lot of different messages as you refresh. So, if you see your message here, be pretty happy because that takes a lot of work to get it there. Does anybody have any issues? Let me see if mine works. I'm working again. Yeah. Okay, yeah. It works for me. If y'all see my message and it works for you too. Yo. Y'all gotta get more creative with your messages. I want to see funny messages. Yeah. Nobody else has any issues with their networking. This database is going to be up for the next day or so. So if you want to send us any cool messages, we'll be sure to use them and look at them and appreciate them. If you send any bad ones, you'll be hearing from the dean real soon. Yeah. Okay, but that's all we have today for demo. We're already over time, so I won't hold you guys any longer. Alden has a Kahoot. Sure. Okay. Oh, I should probably not be sharing this, but it's fine. Let me like not show this.
Did you start it?
Huh? How do you do it? This is the last Kahoot ever.
No.
So we're
actually.
oh, never mind.
It's our last Kahoot.
Never mind, never mind. But just to keep in mind, this is we do give out prizes to the top 5 winners of all of the Kahoot ever. Oh, let me like those on the list. So if you haven't taken it seriously, I recommend taking it seriously now.
Get back on the leaderboard.
Like whoever's YZ22845, I've definitely seen you up there. So if you're not top 5, that's kind of crazy. It's good.
Cool. We start. When adding new data to a backend, like sending a message, what type of request do we use?
2 of these we didn't even use at all. So
It's a post request.
who said get, bro?
We use get to get
That means
data,
useless.
post to push data.
Yeah.
Delete we use to delete data, and add doesn't exist. That was just to mess with people. How do I put it the next thing? Nice. Why do we use a do catch statement? Or at least why did we in this lecture? 1, if there's no Wi-Fi. 2, if the response error is non-nil, if the response code is 200, or if the JSON does not decode. Yes, the correct answer is if the JSON does not decode. Do catches are for whenever you have a try statement, and so far we've used the try statement to try to decode the JSON. And if it doesn't decode properly, then it will catch. So that's what the do catch is. Oh, shifting leaderboard. Multi-select. Oh, this is a hard one. Why do we need to use @escaping? So the closure can outlive the function because we don't know how fast our server will return a response to ensure our response is JSON, or so the closure is only called when there's a 200 response code. And this is multi-select. It's the it's the top 2. The escaping is to make sure that the function can continue running without having to wait for the closure. So without having to wait for our server to respond and wait for our slow Wi-Fi or whatever. That's what the escaping is for. It has a lot to do with multi-threading, but I thought this would be a fun, challenging question. Next. I think there's one more serious one. When we post data to a server, we encode it using JSON, true or false? Yay, this is true. The XML image was there just to mess with you guys, but the JSON serialization stuff that he did, that one line of code, like body equals this, that's what encoding it into JSON is. And finally, our last question, hyped for Swift UI next week, different way to build apps using Swift. Let me just skip the 10 seconds. Yay. Everyone's excited. Nice.
Yeah, so today was our last demo. Today was my very last teaching day, I guess. Although I might do it again next semester.
We'll see.
So thanks you all so much for coming to our lectures, coming to our demos. If you have any questions on anything about the course or anything about our project team, anything related to that, feel free to talk to either of us. But yeah, just thank you so much for your all time. Yeah.
There should be a project corresponding to this, so that's project 7.
We're still in the works for that.
There's no Swift UI project. Next week, Swift UI is guest lecture. We have Vin, who's another member of AppDev, who's gonna guest lecture for us, but there's no project corresponding with that. And yeah.
So after this week, y'all are done.
Not really, but kind of. So
yeah,
thank you
there's
for
still hack
coming.
challenge, so make sure you keep hack challenge in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
But that's the most fun part of it. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.